After seeing the benefits from raising oats, we also knew that they were doing good things to our soil, and we said to ourselves, we've got to find a way to be able to remain in this long term.
You'd probably want to have a market found before you plant the oats if you're beginning, because most elevators have quit handling oats, and so you do need to have a place to go with them before you plant them.
We looked at marketing opportunities, of course, of where we could use that small grain. Is it going to be used on farm or off farm, and percentage on farm versus percentage off farm? How much do I have to rely on traditional markets, and how much am I able to use on my own?
Obviously there is still demand for oats in Iowa, but they are almost exclusively being brought in from other places outside of Iowa, like Canada and the Dakotas. They're being processed and repackaged and sold right here in Iowa. So my wife and family and I have spent the last year intensely researching what it would take to tap into the market that those sellers of oats in farm supply stores are tapping into today. What would it take to convince people to come to me instead as a local Iowa farmer and buy the oats that I'm producing on my farm to feed to their livestock or to use for their seed or whatever other use they were using them for.
While many farmers see the benefits of growing small grains and having a diverse crop rotation on their farms, figuring out what to do with that crop once you produce it can be a challenge.
There are very few local buyers for oats around this. So we live in Black Hawk County in northeastern Iowa. There was a time a few decades ago where virtually every local cooperative would have been a ready purchaser of those oats, or there would have been a lot of local farmers in the area that would have been looking to buy them to feed to their own livestock. Well, much of that has changed drastically over time, and we were quickly reacquainted with that reality last year after we harvested our first large crop of oats. We entertained the opportunity to sell them as a bulk food grade commodity because they met all of the requirements for food grade milling. But due to the supply and demand in that market last year, when we were at the point where we were going to be ready to sell our production, there were no cash market bids available to buy them.
We market our oats through grain millers, their plant in St. Ansgar, Iowa, and that's been a very good relationship for us. Those organic oats go into their system and might be used for food and might be used for feed, but we've had a pretty consistent market with them. Conventional oats, on the other hand, are a challenge. Those markets aren't consistently open. Sometimes they're needed, sometimes they're not. So we've had a little bit more of an issue dealing with our conventional small grains than we have the organic small grains.
In addition to grain millers in St. Ansgar, who buy primarily organic small grains, various elevators, seed companies, and other businesses throughout Iowa and surrounding states do still buy small grains. You can find a list of some of these buyers in Practical Farmers of Iowa's Small Grains Business Directory at practicalfarmers.org/smallgrains.
So faced with that reality, we decided that we would start researching the marketing side of oats more in depth on our own and try to discover, is there a way that we could sell our own oats directly off of the farm to people again? Every time we walk into farm supply stores and we look at the different types of grains and premixed feeds that are available for livestock producers, in virtually every store you walk in, you will always find available for sale 50-pound bags of whole oats. And they typically will range in price from $11 to $15 for a 50-pound bag. I started noticing and taking note of that more and wondering to myself, what would it take for me as an individual farmer to tap into that market?
Thinking more about selling oats has led Earl and other farmers to realize that just as corn and soybean markets have to be cultivated, potential buyers of small grains need to be educated on the benefits of small grains to Iowa farms and farmers. And Earl says that takes engaging with that customer.
So we have been talking to a lot of different end users of oats. We've been talking to horse owners and other livestock owners, people that are looking for oats for seed, for cover crops, or even for spring oat production, trying to understand what are consumers of oats in Iowa looking for, where are they buying their oats from today, why do they buy them where they're buying them, is it simply because that's the only option available? The biggest challenge is helping people to understand that it's important for them to consider other options if they were available.
I think one of the primary barriers is markets. Having a market for a small grain in Iowa where those markets used to be but don't exist anymore, I think that's an uphill battle for us. And it's going to take a combination of end users that see the value in having small grains as part of a rotation on the landscape and see the benefits that come from having a system in place that is like that. It's going to take end users that want to make that step and have that concern, have that value in their business to do that.
I firmly believe that we as Iowa farmers, if we are willing to make a commitment to growing oats again on our farm, that we need to, in order for that to happen and to be successful, we have got to successfully talk to and engage the market that is out there for oats and help them to understand the importance of using their dollars when they buy their oats to purchase them from local suppliers, because the ability to raise oats is very important for everyone in the state of Iowa. And not just oats, but other small grain type crops and other forage type crops that often accompany oats. It's very important for farmers to be able to do those, to raise those crops profitably again, because of the positive impacts it has on soil and water quality in Iowa, and ultimately the quality of the food that we all end up eating that comes either directly from plants and grains or from the meat products that we eat that are typically fed and grown those same plant products.
The issue is the marketing of them, and until we get a hog industry where the mills are set up to use small grains, or we get a beef industry where the nutritionists will include small grains in the cattle ration in their programs, there's not going to be much of a market for it.
While market development needs to happen for the crops to really take off in Iowa, farmers are coming up with ways to economically use small grains on their farms today. For farmers who use cover crops on their corn and soybeans to prevent soil erosion, protect water quality, and help with weed management, growing small grain seed for your own use or the use of your neighbors can be a good way to get started on just a few acres.
So as far as small grains go, as far as markets for them or uses for them, really our main use is just saving for our own use as far as replanting that particular crop, especially when you're talking about cover crop. If you're not going to graze it, if you're not going to save it for seed, it's hard to buy expensive seed if you're not going to get any quote-unquote use out of it. I mean, obviously you're going to gain some soil benefits, but again, that's relatively hard to quantify. So really our main purpose for growing and harvesting small grains is to save for our own use, for planting as a cover crop, for feeding to livestock. And we do have a horse, so the oats might be pretty good for her. And we have sold some of our small grains right off the combine to neighbors. And really that I can see as being ideal. If you have neighbors that are looking for seed and you can sell that right off the combine and just even recoup your costs, that's the bee's knees.
If you wanted to seed cereal rye as a cover crop on, let's say, 1,000 acres, it might not take too many acres to grow your own seed. If you put the cover crop on at a pretty high rate, let's say 2 bushels per acre, you'd need about 2,000 bushels of seed for seeding those acres. And if you got a decent rye yield, let's say 50 bushels an acre, that means you could grow enough seed to cover 1,000 acres on a single 40. Even if that rye cover crop seed would have cost you $10 a bushel, which is on the cheap side, you could still save a lot of money because it doesn't cost much to grow rye. Let's say that when you plant that rye, you seed it at 2 bushels an acre and the initial seed cost you about $25 a bushel. Even if you had to custom drill and custom harvest that seed and you sprayed a fungicide, you could still probably grow and harvest the crop for a little over $100 an acre. And if it only takes you 40 acres, you could probably save around $15,000 to grow 1,000 acres worth of cover crop seed. If you include a few neighbors in that process, you can all save.
Which is why it's pretty exciting if neighbors can get together and say, all right, I'm really interested in planting oats or cereal rye, but I really don't want to pay what this company in Nebraska or Minnesota is selling it for. I've got to pay the shipping to get it here. I'm not sure it's going to grow. It'd be great if you have somebody who has grown small grains before, again, can sell that grain right off the combine and sell it to them at cost, or maybe a little above cost, and have that available to your neighbors. I think that inter-neighbor market could be promising.
While growing small grains for cover crop seed is becoming more common, integrating small grains in some way to a livestock operation is probably the way that the majority of Iowa farmers who grow small grains make use of their production.
Wheat prices this year are low, just like all the rest of the commodity prices, but with some value-added opportunities in small grains, if you're using them maybe to replace some cover crop seed, or you're able to incorporate them as part of a livestock feed ration with a higher protein that we have in spring wheat. In spring wheat opposed to corn, we're able to utilize that protein on our farm, and also give us some opportunity again to market some straw as another component to an economic return, and then allow us to plant a cover crop mix like this one. So timing wise, it's a shorter season crop, allowed us to do some things with cover crops that we aren't able to do after a corn and soybean crop.
What I like about small grains for any livestock operation is that it's tough to sell small grains, conventional or organic. There just isn't that big of a market like there used to be. There still is, We've got a local elevator that will buy conventional oats. If we can't sell it on the organic market, or if we've got extra oats left over we want to get rid of, we can take it to a local elevator and they'll put it in their own feed. So they got that option too. But it's a good way to utilize grains that don't have the uses they once did, where every farmer had oats and fed oats and small grains. We just don't have that market today like we once did.
In the coming weeks, we'll talk more about the ways that Iowa farmers use small grains to benefit their livestock operations by using small grains in their hog and cattle rations, planting grazing mixes for cattle after small grains harvest, and using the straw to bed hogs and cattle.